Welcome back to Palestine Bookshelf. I'm Stephen Heiner, and today we're going to be discussing reporting from Ramallah, an Israeli journalist in an occupied land by Amira Haas. Now, this is the second Amira Haas book I reviewed. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card up for Drinking the Sea at Gaza, which I reviewed on the Stephen Heiner channel originally. Now, this is unlike that book. Drinking the Sea at Gaza was more essay driven. This, like the two Gideon Levy books that I reviewed, are driven from articles that she wrote for Haaretz. And I'll put a link to the two Gideon Levy books as well in the description as well as cards. So we get a chronological sense of articles that are tied to events that are happening. And the first article, I think, starts, I want to say 1997. Yes. The first article starts in 1997, and the last article that we have in the text is, I think, 2003, October 2002. So this is a snapshot around the Second Intifada, before and after. And it focuses on the West Bank, which continues to be ignored, understandably, with a lot of focus on Gaza. But people don't realize that as the focus is on Gaza, more progress is able to be made in the occupation in the West Bank. Now, Norm Finkelstein said something interesting the other day in an interview that, unlike in previous situations in which the West Bank rose in solidarity with Gaza, this time the response was so dramatic from Israel onto Gaza that the West Bank really was quiescent and they did not protest in any sort of way. And this has not led to better conditions for them. It's actually allowed the settlers to, let's say, move faster and move farther as the world press is focused on Gaza and not on the West Bank. So Haas allows us to get some sense of the things that are going on. And as I've talked before on the channel, as you get to know Oslo better, you understand how the reaction in the West Bank in this period particularly went. So I want to set the stage by talking about some of the conditions of apartheid that the Palestinians had to be subject to. We experienced this ominous Hebron dynamic last Friday. I have a press card, and M, a teacher by profession, and a refugee camp resident, has documentation from B'Tselem stating that he is a field researcher for the Israeli organization. It was not the first time M had entered an area under curfew, though he never would have done so alone without the company of an Israeli journalist. Even if IDF soldiers allow him to enter the area, Jewish settlers might hassle him. As it turned out, when we passed a group of settlers, pregnant women, infants in strollers, children roaming between policemen's legs and soldiers' rifles, a young man started to yell, "Arab, you're not allowed here. There's a curfew. Get out of here." As he shouted, he approached M, brandishing his fist and repeating the message, "Arab, get out of here. There's a curfew." The soldiers and policemen made no effort to get the young settler to back off. Instead, they ordered M to move away, and so he did, under a torrent of jeers. The ordinary kind and another kind, which constitutes a permanent, large obstruction. The ordinary kind of roadblock consists of a few concrete or plastic blocks, with or without tire piercers, and a handful of soldiers. Sometimes, after a great deal of pleading, or if a car bears diplomatic plates, the soldiers will allow free passage. The permanent, obstructive kind of roadblock is the last word in the IDF's tactics to suppress the Intifada. This obstruction is a simple yet clever improvement that saves the IDF personnel resources. It often consists of a high earth rampart and a number of concrete blocks. In some cases, the rampart and the blocks are adjacent to one another, while in other cases the earth covers the blocks. Some road obstructions consist only of a deep ditch that an IDF bulldozer has dug across a side road leading to a main road, while others include both a ditch and concrete blocks. Of course, an IDF or Border Patrol jeep positioned near the obstruction, with a rifle barrel sticking out of one of its windows, ensures that no one will be foolish enough to bring a bulldozer to try to fill the ditch and clear away the blocks. There are 7 roads leading to and from Beit Jala and western Bethlehem. All of these roads have been obstructed and are now closed to vehicular traffic. In other words, even if an extremely compassionate IDF soldier wanted to allow an ambulance transporting a heart patient to pass, he would have to first summon a bulldozer, and some digging implements in order to clear the way. So they make it really difficult for people to simply travel on the roads. A 3-year-old girl is being pulled along by her mother and aunt, both of whom carry baskets on their heads as well as their arms. She is frightened by the television camera. It looks like the rifle she saw a few moments earlier in the hands of one of the soldiers. A number of men arrive at the obstruction, huffing and puffing, and one of them, without missing a beat, looks back and asks, "What kind of peace is this anyway?" Answering his own question, he proclaims, "The peace of the brave, of course." One young man initially says he has some business to attend to in Bethlehem. However, a moment later he cannot contain himself and removes a small plastic bottle from his jacket pocket. "You see, this is milk, my wife's milk. She gave birth 2 days ago. Our baby girl is sick. She is hospitalized in Bethlehem. My wife is recuperating at home. Because of the road obstructions, she cannot take a car or an ambulance to the hospital. In her condition, she cannot walk this distance, so that is why I am bringing our baby my wife's milk." I can't help it. I mean, I understand that he's dealing with an obstruction, dealing with roadblocks, but I can't help but smile at the fortitude of these people. They're not feeling sorry for themselves. They're not complaining. They're just getting on with it. And that's something I always see in the Palestinians. I'm such in awe of their ability to hold on to sumud and to keep forging forward despite every obstacle, both inside and outside. So we'll get to it a little later. But the corruption of the PA and the apathy of the Arab countries. In Israel's defensive war against this Palestinian offensive, these are the weapons at the disposal of the IDF, whose troops are deployed throughout the West Bank and Gaza, where some 3 million Palestinians live. And keep in mind, this is in the late 90s, so those numbers are different now. F-16 fighter jets, helicopter gunships, pilotless drones, tanks, armored personnel carriers, armored jeeps, reinforced concrete positions on highways and junctions, observation towers, ships, sniper rifles, bulldozers, bombs, tank and mortar shells, air-to-ground and ground-to-ground missiles, tear gas, stun grenades, barbed wire, collaborators. The IDF fires from the air, sea, and ground, from tanks, from fortified positions, from observation towers, from behind jeeps. This is what Israel does with the weapons it possesses and the means of control it exercises. Assassinates Palestinians whom the GSS, this is also Shin Bet or Shabak, claim are linked to terrorist attacks against Israelis both inside the Green Line or beyond it, kills and wounds dozens of armed Palestinians, kills hundreds and wounds thousands of unarmed Palestinians, including women, children, and the elderly, demolishes houses with bulldozers and tanks, demolishes Palestinian police or security personnel positions, shells buildings belonging to the PA, seizes homes located along highways, uproots orchards and fields, destroys hothouses, factories, and workshops, detains more than 1,000 Palestinians, it's far more than that now, imposes curfews for days and weeks on entire neighborhoods or villages located near settlements, imposes closure on the entire West Bank and Gaza Strip, denies Palestinians access to international crossing points, creates physical obstructions, concrete blocks, trenches, and earth ramparts to prevent Palestinian vehicles from traveling from one place to another, blocks main highways in the West Bank and Gaza to Palestinian vehicular traffic, beats Palestinian pedestrians, halts traffic on Palestinian roads for hours on end, prevents beach access to the residents, including children of Rafah and Khan Yunis, limits the importation of food, medicines, and raw materials into the Palestinian territories, limits the marketing of Palestinian agricultural produce, issues evacuation and demolition orders on homes in areas adjacent to the Green Line, reduces the offshore territory in which Gazan fishing boats can operate from 12 nautical miles to 3. What about the murder of children? Again, people think this started on October 7th, and they don't realize it's been happening for a long time, so let's read about what was happening in late 90s, early aughts. This is a discussion between Amira and a representative of the IDF. She asks, what is a mistake? That the rifle moves? Answer, for example, someone says to the other forces that he has identified someone suspicious. We identified a boy who is making strange movements. Maybe he wants to pick up a stone or something like that. The one who identified him requests permission to fire in his direction. The forward command, the brigade commander, definitely does not allow it, and he continues to plead. So the commander says, if you think he is very suspicious, fire a warning shot. And a warning shot is 20 meters and into an open area. From the ensuing investigation, it turns out that he saw the person's head through a telescope, took 5 meters, and the wind. The rifle wasn't aimed right, and he hit him in the head. The guy's saying this with a straight face. They did an investigation, and somehow, instead of shooting a warning shot, he shot him in the head. He accidentally shot him in the head. Do you realize how it's already challenging to hit someone in the head when you're trying? He's saying that he accidentally hit him when he was trying not to. And he's saying this with a straight face. This is the typical IDF response to their murders. This is further on in this conversation. Nonetheless, there are children who were wounded or killed after they were hit in the head, unless these were mistakes. Answer: if they were children, they were mistakes. Amira: do they talk to you about this? Answer: they talk to us about it a lot. They forbid us to shoot children. How do they say it? You don't shoot a child who is 12 or younger. Amira: that is, shooting a child of 12 or older is permissible? Answer: 12 and up is allowed. He's not a child anymore. He's already had his bar mitzvah, something like that. Yeah. Except Palestinians don't normally have bar mitzvahs. That might be something interesting for them to think about. And children are below the age of 12. Is there no order that between 12 and 18 you shoot at the legs and not the head? Answer: of course we try to see to it that he is over 20. Amira: in the 10 seconds that you have. Answer: in the 10 seconds that I have, I must estimate how old he is. Amira: and where the wind is blowing, and what the margin of deviation is, and which way he'll jump. Answer: yes, but sharpshooters hardly make mistakes. The mistakes are made by people who aren't sharpshooters. Except that's always what we see. We saw it in the Great March of Return. We see shots to the head, shots to the torso of children, medics, press. These are all war crimes, but these are all apparently accidents. So that means we have to believe that all Israeli snipers are incompetent. That's the narrative. So either Israeli snipers are incompetent or they intentionally shoot people in the head. But since they can't admit that they shoot people in the head intentionally, they have to be incompetent. Either way, they expect us to believe this, and I think that's the strange thing. This is about Muhammad Hilis, who is 13 years old. On Tuesday, February the 27th, he approached the border area where the Netzarim settlers passed by with a military escort. At around 2:30 p.m., witnesses told a field researcher from the Palestinian Center for Human Rights some 30 children congregated about 50 meters from the border with Israel and started throwing stones at the jeep leading the settlers' convoy. The jeep stopped, and a soldier fired 2 live bullets at the kids. Hilis was hit on the left side of his head. Witnesses said that the soldier did not try to warn the kids using non-lethal methods. Hilis died from his critical injury on March the 1st. But again, you throw a stone, I shoot a bullet. But stone throwers are not the only ones hit with live ammunition. On the same Tuesday that Hilis was fatally injured, a bullet also hit 5-year-old Fatma Abu Salah. Her family lives in the village of Absan, east of Khan Yunis, near the border with Israel. Her mother told the Gaza Center for Human Rights that shooting could be heard in the area as early as 4:30 a.m. At 7:30 a.m., Fatma was at the entrance to her kindergarten, about a kilometer west of the border. That is when she was shot. A 5-year-old at 7:30 in the morning at the entrance to her kindergarten. Was it a stray bullet from an exchange of fire? In Gaza, they do not believe in stray bullets. People think that the IDF has equipment so advanced that they can see every target day or night, and therefore every shot fired, near or far, is intentional, even if it hits an 8-year-old boy, or in this case, a 5-year-old girl. Going back to that conversation Amira was having with the IDF representative, isn't there a danger that snipers will compete to see who does more shooting? Answer: with us, there is no such thing. Somebody told me about one place where the older guys were angry because the younger guys weren't restrained. They were hankering to shoot. But even I, who before the army said I would try very hard not to shoot, if you're already there and into your weapon and you go out on an ambush, it's terrible to say this, but you hope that something will come of it. We've heard this. Gideon Levy talks about this as well, this idea that a girl will ask you, did you kill anybody? And you want to be able to say yes. You sit there at night and it's very boring and you're really tired, and your last hope is that you'll catch the bad guys and teach them a lesson. In one place, the older guys arrived to replace us, and they couldn't believe how much the young guys were shooting. After they say stop, you have to stop shooting immediately, and it took them another minute because of their craving to shoot. These are the kinds of things that, in my opinion, weaken the IDF, the lack of restraint. There are even soldiers who fire a rubber bullet but load a regular bullet ahead of it. It increases the force. It usually kills. Again, these are just the casual confessions. Amira says, I've been in those places, these demonstrations where Palestinians open fire. Answer. So she's saying that she's there, and so she's witnessed this idea of the Palestinians firing. Are you trying to say that the Palestinian fire is pathetic? And Haas says, yes. And the respondent says, I agree. Usually the Palestinian fire is pathetic. And in this case, what they mean is it's not directed. It's firing for effect. As with throwing rocks. I'm just trying to show some sort of resistance. I don't actually have the ability to sight my weapon well. The shooting is totally ridiculous, and when there's finally shooting, you know that most of it will be in the air. Haas, are they just showing off? Answer, yes, the IDF knows this. Haas, so why kill? Why not just injure? Good question. And here he can, again, this is further on in this conversation. This is the IDF respondent. I have a friend who is a settler, and for him the firing is not pathetic at all. In his opinion, every time they shoot, we have to fire back tenfold. If you were to talk with him, this conversation would be totally different. You are talking to me, and I ask myself more questions, like whether I should just let them shoot and maybe I shouldn't fire back. When I am a soldier, I don't ask myself. I ask, but there are orders, and I know in advance that if they shoot, all I need to do is ask myself if I should shoot again. Mistakes happen because this is not how things go. One guy decides to shoot, and someone else decides to do the opposite. Now I'll be a bit tougher. The IDF shoots because there are instances when soldiers are killed. Abdel Jawad points to the reciprocal relationship between armed Palestinian activists and the IDF. During the first weeks of the Al-Aqsa Intifada, Palestinian shooting was in the air, or at the moon. Shooting that cannot, or perhaps does not, intend to hit anyone. Shooting that is, from a Palestinian perspective, ineffective. Abdel Jawad thinks the IDF understood the significance of this ceremonial and declarative shooting perfectly, but chose to respond to it as if it were shooting between equal forces. The exaggeration of the significance of the shooting created the illusion that there was a real armed conflict going on. Thus, despite public anger over shooting from residential areas, the shooters' aura as fighters grew. That is, the people who fired from residential areas helped the IDF to escalate things, and with its retaliatory actions the IDF strengthened the Palestinian line of thinking that only the use of arms can cause the Israelis real losses. Leaning on a cane, the man stood on a mountain of ruins, a jumble of crushed concrete, twisted iron rods, mattress shreds, electric cables, fragments of ceramic tiles, pieces of water pipes, and an orphaned light switch. This is my home, he said, and my son is inside. His name is Abu Rashid. His son, Jamal, 35, was confined to a wheelchair. The bulldozer began to gnaw at the house while the family was still inside, and where they would be, if not in the house, seeking, like all the residents of Jenin refugee camp, the safest place to hide from the mortar and rocket and machine gun fire, praying for a brief respite. Abu Rashid and the other family members hurried to the front door, went out with their hands up, and tried to yell to the huge bulldozer, the operator of which was unseen and unheard, that there were people inside. But the bulldozer did not stop roaring, retreating, and then attacking again, returning and taking another bite out of the concrete wall until it collapsed on Jamal before anyone could save him. Like many others, Abu Raed, 51, was also enlisted for IDF missions, enlisted in this case being used as a human shield. For 5 days he accompanied the soldiers. During the day he walked ahead of them from house to house, knocking on doors as soldiers concealed themselves behind him, aiming their rifles at the door and at him. At night he was forced to stay with them in one of the houses they occupied. They handcuffed him and 2 soldiers guarded him, he said. At the end of his mission, they told him to stay in a certain house alone. All around him the bulldozers and tanks roared. One of the tanks rolled onto the house. Abu Raed jumped to another house, leaping from one destroyed house to another until he reached his own home, which he also found partially destroyed, hit by 3 rockets. There were 13 people in the house when the rockets landed on it. So this last part of this section is a siege that was put onto a building of the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian Ministry of Culture. And this is a description of what happened when the IDF left and what people observed. What awaited them, these are the Palestinians who are going back into the building, what awaited them surpassed even their worst fears, and deeply shocked the representatives and cultural attachés of foreign consulates who visited the site the following day. As in other offices, all the high-tech and electronic equipment was either ruined or missing. Computers, photocopy machines, cameras, scanners, hard drives, editing equipment worth thousands of dollars, television monitors. The broadcast antenna atop the building was destroyed. Telephones vanished. A collection of Palestinian art objects, mostly hand embroideries, disappeared. Perhaps it was buried under heaps of documents and furniture. Perhaps it was taken. Furniture was dragged from place to place, piled up, broken by soldiers. Gas heaters were overturned and thrown upon scattered papers and books, broken diskettes and discs, and smashed window panes. In the Department for the Encouragement of Children's Art, the soldiers smeared the walls with paints, destroying the children's paintings that hung there. In every room of the various departments, literature, film, children and youth culture, books, discs, pamphlets, and documents were amassed and soiled with urine and excrement. Remember, this is the most moral army in the world. There are 2 toilets on every floor, but the soldiers urinated and defecated everywhere else, including in the rooms where they lived for a month. They did their business on the floors, in emptied-out flower pots, even in desk drawers. They defecated into plastic bags, and these were scattered about. Some of them burst. Someone even managed to defecate into the photocopy machine. I want you to think about this. This means that they had to live. The IDF were willing to live with such unpleasantness in order to do this to the Palestinians. The soldiers urinated into empty water bottles. These too were scattered by the dozen throughout the buildings, in cardboard boxes, among the piles of damaged goods, on desks, under desks, next to the furniture the soldiers smashed, among the children's books they tossed around. Some of the bottles had opened and their yellow liquid contents spilled out, staining the thin wall-to-wall carpeting. It was especially difficult to enter 2 of the building's floors for the unbearable stench of feces and urine. Soiled toilet paper was also strewn everywhere. Israeli political consciousness has refused, and continues to refuse, to grasp the sum total of the details, characteristics, actions, and consequences of ongoing Israeli rule over another people. When one tries to talk of the totality known as the occupation, the media, our social barometer, respond with resentment. This totality is too abstract, transparent, and academic. Let's talk about human interest stories instead. But when one talks about personal experiences, that is exactly how they are perceived. Another tearjerker about a suffering Palestinian individual. Before the Intifada, such stories, deaths at roadblocks, Israeli quotas on drinking water, bans on building schools in Area C, settlement expansion, restrictions on the freedom of movement, were understood as anomalies in the peace process, though they affected Palestinians day in and day out. Today, and this is in 2001, 2002, today reports on Palestinian suffering are perceived as national treason. Israelis conclude that the suicide bombings are the result of a murderous tendency inherent to the Palestinians, their religion, and their mentality. In other words, people turn to bio-religious explanations, not socio-historical ones. This is a grave mistake. If one wants to put an end to the terror attacks in general, and the suicide bombings in particular, one must ask why the majority of Palestinians support them. Without their support, the Palestinian organizations would not dare to dispatch suicide bombers and invite the anticipated escalatory Israeli response. The Palestinians support the attacks, even the most ruthless ones, because they are convinced that their existence, and their future as a nation are the real targets of the Israeli regime, both when it applied rule by deceit tactics in the Oslo period, and now when it uses the tactics of military escalation and siege. Ask why, and you will get answers. These are the rules of war as laid down by us every day for the last 2 years. This was written in 2002. A Palestinian is a terrorist when he attacks Israeli civilians on both sides of the Green Line, in Israel and the territories, and when he attacks Israeli soldiers at the entrance to a Palestinian city. A Palestinian is a terrorist when an army unit attacks his neighborhood with tanks and he shoots a soldier who gets out of a tank momentarily. And he is a terrorist when he is hit by helicopter gunfire while holding his rifle. Palestinians are terrorists whether they kill civilians or soldiers. The Israeli soldier is a fighter when he shoots a missile from a helicopter or a shell from a tank at a group of people gathered in Khan Yunis. After the fighter, or one of his comrades in arms, fires a shell or a missile at a house from which the army claims a Qassam rocket was launched and kills a man and woman. He is a fighter when he encounters 2 armed Palestinians in the brush. The Israeli soldier kills armed people and kills civilians. He kills senior commanders of murderous terrorist cells, and he kills kindergarten-aged children and adults in their homes. More accurately, they are killed by IDF fire. Most accurately, they were killed, Palestinian sources claim. Right. She's using that phrase, right? They are killed by IDF fire. This distances it from an individual, and then they were killed, Palestinian sources claimed. Who knows if they were really killed? Palestinians are not arrested as prisoners of war with immunity from interrogation and prosecution. Their names are known, and every detail of the investigations and indictments against them are available to the public and can be published. If and when a flimsy investigation actually identifies an Israeli soldier who deviated, i.e. killed or used his weapon improperly, looted, or abused people at a checkpoint, his identity remains secret. In hundreds of other cases, the Army replies, "We are unfamiliar with the complaint." In thousands of other cases, nobody bothers to query the IDF anymore because they know it won't go anywhere. That's their experience. And one of the recurring themes for how Oslo broke down on both sides is the Israelis were asking themselves, if we have a peace process, why are there suicide bombers? And the Palestinians were asking themselves, if there's a peace process, why are settlements continuing? The predictions of eruption made by Abdel Jawad and others were based on their analysis of the Palestinian public's general discontent with the Oslo process. Most Palestinians, says Abdel Jawad, and this is in 2001, supported the process as a means to independence and the establishment of a state within the 1967 borders. In this respect, the Palestinian silent majority is in the peace camp. But their frustration stemmed from what became increasingly clear as the process was implemented. Israel, instead of gradually withdrawing and loosening its hold on the Palestinian people and territories, tightened its grip. It did the exact opposite of what they said they were going to do. The Palestinian Authority and its chairman, Yasser Arafat, were elected in January 1996 for a term that was supposed to end with the interim period, that is, in May 1999. The interim period, however, was extended, as were the terms of office of the elected PA officials. As long as no new date is set for elections, it means, in effect, an open-ended extension of their terms in office. True, in the West and in Israel, there is no expectation that Arab regimes be democratic, But the Palestinian public does expect this and wants to develop a political culture based on democratic values, the rule of law, and respect for civil and human rights. With their terms of office extended indefinitely, members of the Palestinian leadership should be particularly sensitive to the public. But in practice, the opposite is true. From the outset, the Intifada was aimed in two directions: the Israeli occupation and the Palestinian Authority. Many Palestinians see a direct link between the dysfunctional, disrespectful, and indeed corrupt conduct of PA institutions and officials, the fact that years of negotiations with Israel have not brought them any closer to independence, the ongoing settlement enterprise, and the fact that the IDF continues to control most of the territories. People believe that a different kind of regime, one which consults, exchanges views, considers the positions of others, and in which everyone is equal before the law, would have strengthened the Palestinian negotiators vis-a-vis their Israeli colleagues, cum rivals. When the Palestinian workers who labored in Israel speak of the PA neglecting their case, they know what they are talking about. Since the early 1970s, the Israeli authorities have deducted Social Security payments from the Palestinians' paychecks at the same rate as Israeli workers. But individual Palestinians have received only a small portion of these benefits, sick pay and workers' compensation. They never received unemployment benefits. When challenged in court, the state claimed that Social Security payments collected from Palestinians were collectively used for the development of the territories during Israel's period of direct rule, but had difficulty documenting this allocation and development. In the framework of the negotiations, it was decided in 1994 that the Social Security payments collected from Palestinians in the past, together with those to be collected in the future, would be transferred to a special PA fund dedicated to the welfare of Palestinians employed in Israel. But the PA never created this fund and has failed to provide a clear explanation for its neglect to do so. Thus, the money Palestinian workers continue to pay to the State of Israel for Social Security benefits was never passed on to the PA. If before the Intifada there was need to worry about the fate of these monies, today it is safe to assume that they will surely be swallowed up by the Israeli treasury, along with all the other taxes and fees the government of Israel is obliged to transfer to the PA but has frozen. Due to the PA's negligence, the workers' representatives are demanding that the PA not give handouts, but see to it that they get work or unemployment benefits until the situation improves and the road to Israel reopens. So as I say, Palestinians are facing a battle both with the occupiers and within their own government structures because they're totally corrupt. Now, Haas actually starts the book by talking about what's happening in the prisons, and I thought it was really touching and something that I've seen reflected in other memoirs as well, what it means, I would say particularly in Ahed Tamimi's memoir. She's a young girl who's in prison. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card, because she was imprisoned herself, and she talks about what happened to her and what she knows has happened to other people. Still, many detainees remain in prison, and their families' schedules are structured around the days when visits are permitted, Mondays and Fridays. The night before a visit, the children write letters and draw pictures for their fathers. On Fridays, when everyone else is still sleeping, and on Mondays immediately after school, when all the other kids go to play or do homework, they head for the prison. They meet in the yard, if it is not raining, or in the cells, which hold 4 prisoners each, if it is. Overcrowding precludes the possibility that a couple converse intimately. The children complain that Daddy has no time for them. All the visitors come to greet him or consult with him, and they don't even get 5 minutes in which to play or talk. The children have informed their fathers that after they are released, they will build them mosques near the house so they won't have to venture far to pray. One mother relays, "Some guards overhear them speaking like that and get angry. They tell us, 'Is that what you teach your children?' And I retort that I don't have the time to teach them. I don't have time to sit them down and teach them anything. All the women function as both mother and father. Only, Daddy took us to restaurants, to the amusement park, and Mommy takes us to jail," the children complain. Some women teach school, others manage the stores their husbands opened, and their daughters run the house. As prisoners' wives during the Intifada, they assumed an independent attitude that surpasses that of most Palestinian women, let alone traditional ones. "I am happy to take responsibility," says B.A., but not all the responsibility, and explains how much her husband helped her with the housework. One difficulty they face is discussed with tight-lipped brevity. When the men were detained in Israeli jails, the entire society stood behind them. Detention and arrest were experiences that touched every Palestinian household regardless of political affiliation. Detention in a Palestinian prison mutes the expression of solidarity. Those who disapprove of the arrests are afraid to speak out lest they be harmed. Observe the detainees' families. Neighbors who work with a PA or its security apparatus greet them hurriedly in the stairwell or on the sidewalk, never asking after their detained neighbor. Other children at school ask, with curiosity, maybe once or twice, "What's with your dad?" and that's it. Most teachers utter not a word. The detainees' children are not ostracized, but they do not receive the kind of love they used to get when their fathers were held in Israeli jails. Which, I mean, if you think about it, here they're passing. This is the idea of Israel subcontracting with the PA to do their dirty work, and it causes this backlash within Palestinian society, which is self-destructive, which is exactly the sort of pressure that Israel wants to create. It's brilliant, really. The Palestinians are more accustomed than the Israelis to living poorly and in uncertainty and for longer periods of time. Mourid al-Barghouti would talk about this as the phrase waiting for things to clear up or waiting for things to be more clear. And the Palestinians have been living that way since the 40s. They have familial, social, and religious mechanisms that offer more protection in the face of economic and emotional hardships. By no means is it obvious that Israel, the military power, will win the contest between the two peoples over who can endure more suffering and display a greater patience. And I might add, I'm recording this in January of 2025. Where is the defeat of Hamas from October of 2023? We would not have any of us have thought that Hamas could continue to push off the Israelis, but they have. There is no victory so far. A, who was hit in the leg and hip with live ammunition while throwing stones at soldiers, has noticed that since he was injured, he is prone to fits of rage, where he scares people away. When he hears shooting, his wound throbs and irritates him. By talking with Landa, he learns not to be afraid of the pain, to accept himself even when he has outbursts, and to admit that his friends are not to blame, so that next time he will count quietly to himself before lashing out at them. I mean, what courage, what virtue, what character. Barghouti, so this is talking about Marwan Barghouti. Barghouti is not the only Palestinian whose world of associations has been colored by Israeli Jewish lore. There's a whole generation of people aged 30 to 50 who were born or raised in the territories and came to know Israel quite well. Some worked in Israel, others were active in the resistance against the occupation, and were sentenced to long terms in Israeli jails. In prison, they learned about Israel through the wardens, the Israeli criminals, and their families. At work, they met Israelis, heard about their troubles, and shared in their family celebrations. For every prison guard who embittered their lives, they remember the one who offered them a piece of cake baked by his wife. For every employer who fired them without paying their wages, they remembered the one who sent money during a curfew or a siege. They learned that Israel is a multi-dimensional society. It is impossible to exaggerate the importance of this experience and what they gained from it if one wants to understand the support that Barghouti's generation gave to Madrid and Oslo. True, the Palestinian interpretation of those processes turned out to be different from the Israeli one. Barghouti and his comrades and part of the Israeli peace camp understood they would lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state in the territories occupied in 1967, including East Jerusalem. The right of return, they believed, would be partially implemented because, as one of them said, having recognized Israel, we don't intend to undermine its existence as a Jewish state. But they also expected Israel to acknowledge its responsibility for the Palestinian catastrophe of 1948, and they did not expect Israel to accelerate the rate of Jewish settlement in the territories. And of course, we know now all of that was betrayed. Here she is talking with some, I want to say kids, but they're basically young militants, 4 brigade members, aged 21 to 26. And this is not the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. This is Abu Ali, which was named after another young martyr, obviously. So 4 brigade members aged 21 to 26, all wanted by Israel, took part in the conversation. So she had this conversation with them. The oldest was 11 years old when the first Intifada began. His strongest memory of that time is the complete disruption of his studies. After the Palestinian Authority was formed, no attempt was made to compensate all those children for the lost years of schooling. Instead, they were recruited, especially the Fatah supporters among them, into the PA security apparatus or thrown into the Israeli labor market or put on West Bank unemployment rosters. Like the entire generation of the First Intifada, they grew up in the shadow of that uprising's repression. Extended curfews, daily deaths, arrests that emptied entire neighborhoods of their adult males, general strikes that paralyzed the little that remained of routine life, the murder of collaborators. Then, gradually, they grew up with promises of change for the better. Negotiations, autonomy, independence, work, livelihood. 2 of the 4 carry mobile phones that are never turned off. Fatah activists say that in the GSS interrogation rooms, and again, GSS is a General Security Service, is another way of referring to Shin Bet or Shabak, it becomes apparent that a considerable amount of the incriminating evidence against them was gathered by tapping their phones. Careless amateurism, say members of the generation that did not have cellulars when they were underground some 15 years ago. But all 4 say they change their phones or numbers daily. And remember, they're going to tell you that Palestinians are inhuman, that they teach all their children. I think there was a comment on one of my videos some time ago asking, oh, what about the Palestinian school books in which they say, if there are 5 Jews and you shoot 3, how many are left? And these sorts of narratives are belied by what's captured by Amira when she's actually interacting with Palestinians. Q has a hard time answering her students' questions. One girl in her class who lives near the border, a place that attracts IDF fire, was hit in her back with live ammunition. Didn't the soldiers know that I just went out to get live bread, to get some bread? She asks her teacher again and again. And another wounded boy keeps asking the adults in his neighborhood whether the Jews have no children, if that is why they shoot at us indiscriminately. So if the children are programmed to think that Jews are horrible people that they need to murder, why are they acting as if Jews are reasonable people who they don't understand? Did the soldiers know that I just went out to get some bread? Because the reaction is, well, if the soldiers knew that, surely they wouldn't shoot me. That's a young Palestinian child's reaction. How does that square with them being taught that they need to murder all Jews all the time? Do the Jews have no children? Is that why they shoot at us indiscriminately? Again, here's a child trying to puzzle. Why would they shoot at children indiscriminately? Maybe they don't have children. These are children's responses to unbelievable circumstances, and it belies this idea, these lies, the Hasbra, that Palestinian children are just taught that Jews are to be murdered all the time. That can't possibly be true when you have responses like this. Here's another one. Dad asks a 3-year-old Damir, which is conscience in Arabic, very fitting here, are the Jews born like us, little babies, or are they born already big with uniforms and guns? All right. If you'd like to support the channel, here you can order a copy of this book. There's a link in the description. That's one way you can support our work. You can hit like, you can subscribe, you can share this with people who are interested in learning more, who are open-minded to hearing the other side, as opposed to the side that they hear in the mainstream media, which is that we must stand with Israel and everyone else is wrong. If you'd like to nominate a book for 2025, you can go to my Amazon wish list. It's unlikely that I will have a chance to review it because most of the year is already planned out, but I might change my mind depending on what book you choose. But if I don't review it this year, it will be reviewed in 2026. So my Amazon wish list is linked below. If you'd like to consider supporting my work on a regular basis, there's a link to my Patreon. Or if you'd like to give a one-time donation just to thank me for this video, there's a link to PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee. There's a reminder that proceeds from all these different forms of support go towards the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which helps Palestinian children get medical care that they could not otherwise get. That's what this channel is focused on doing. If we're going to highlight Palestinian issues, we're going to channel any of the profits that we get towards the Palestinian people. It doesn't make sense to do anything else with those profits. As always, until next time, enjoy your reading.